Homebrew, some people love it, some people hate it. Should you be using it at your table? Let's look at some of the arguments because there are some on both sides. On one side, you have people saying you should not homebrew because you take your players' agency away when you're randomly changing rules and they don't know exactly what's going on. Another argument that people make is if you change all the rules, you're not really playing 5th edition anymore. And the last common argument I see is that you are not a game designer and you're just going to ruin the game by changing all of the rules. Now let's talk about some of these arguments, and in doing so, because I'm actually a fan of homebrew, I'm going to explain to you why you should be homebrewing, why all of those arguments are kind of silly, and how to homebrew correctly or appropriately for your table. The first argument is that you're going to take your player's agency away if you randomly change the rules is actually pretty correct, which is why you should not be randomly changing the rules. You should set expectations with your players. This is a great session 0 conversation, but you can still make rule adjustments at any point in the campaign. If you plan on changing a rule, talk about it with your players. And you don't always have to explain the specific mechanics of what you're going to be changing. For example, I don't tell my players what things I'm changing about monsters, but they know that when they see a monster, it may or may not have adjustments, or it might be a completely homebrewed monster. I like to set that expectation so that they're not like, no, this is how you're supposed to kill this monster or whatever. Like sometimes there's a little bit of mystery in there. I'm also a fan of whenever you agree on a rule that you want to change at your table, that you write it down and you keep a living document with some of the different rule changes and rules that everyone has agreed on. Once you've set the expectation, you've talked about any rule changes with your players, you've documented the ones that you're going to document, and they just understand that there are certain things that you might change up on the fly, you're good to go. The next one is that you're not really playing 5th edition if you're changing all the rules or whatever edition that you play. That one is just kind of silly, and it's only an issue if you play at a lot of conventions or with a lot of new or random people all the time, because it's just not really worth it to talk about all of the homebrew rules that you use. That's why Adventurers League doesn't use any homebrew. If you're not playing at conventions or any of that stuff, play the game that you find most fun for you and your table with whatever rule adjustments that you need. Like I don't even worry about people saying you're not really playing 5th edition because you've changed the rules. Like, it's somewhat of a silly argument in that, the label or the title for the game you're playing ultimately doesn't really matter. If you and your table are having fun, go for it. And side note, you are still playing 5th edition. That's the argument is also stupid. Even if you change a bunch of the rules, you're still playing 5th edition. I'm sure at a certain point it would start looking like something else, but I don't think that many people are getting that ridiculous with it. Which takes me actually to the last one, and you're not a game designer, you're going to ruin your game. Give me just a second. Right here I have the guide for the Dungeon Masters. If we open it up to, this rule is very abstract. It's really deep in the book. Just kidding, it's on the first, actual page. As a referee, the DM interprets the rules and decides when to abide by them and when to change them. That's right. Dungeon Master's Guide recommends that you change rules. That is literally how the game was designed, by the game designers, which also means technically changing the rules is written. I know, that's kind of mind-blowing, right? Now, I do have kind of a personal philosophy or rule for myself when it comes to homebrew and changing rules, and that is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. When I first started DMing, and I've seen a lot of other new Dungeon Masters make the same mistake, I wanted to change every rule that I thought could be improved or that didn't make the most sense, and it just made the game more confusing. It was a lot of energy and time put into it, and I ended up throwing away most of those rules because it just overcomplicated the game. Wait until you have had an issue with a rule before you change it. Now, that might seem a little counterintuitive, like shouldn't I be proactive? This is one of those areas I would say no. Just follow the rules until you and your table have agreed, yeah, that rule is kind of stupid, we should change it. And then you change it. Certain rules you might only encounter a few times a year, and it isn't worth having this big complicated system that you have to pull out the rule book to figure out how to establish. It's like, yeah, let's just go with the super basic thing that may not be the most realistic, but if we're all fine with it, let's just use that. Save yourself some time and put your efforts towards things that are gonna show up in the game and make it a more fun experience. Now, there's one other reason that I know of that Dungeon Masters don't like to homebrew, and that is it's a lot of work, or it can be a lot of work, and they just don't want to do it. I would challenge you to try to put in that extra effort, because homebrew, and especially players homebrewing their characters or different aspects, can really help bring the game to life and make it way more immersive and fun. I would challenge you, put in that extra effort and let people homebrew stuff. If you have somebody who's trying to make a wizard, so they make a blade singer, but they want to use wisdom as their spellcasting modifier, let them do it. And then if it ends up being broken down the road, adjust it at that point. but have fun with it and try to let the players do the things that they want to do and make the characters they want to make. As a bonus for making it this far and liking the video, I have a homebrew rule for you that I recently discovered that I think is a lot of fun. Now, it's only sort of a homebrew rule. It's more of a tweak on an existing rule, and it's stealth. When you roll stealth, only roll it at the point of possible detection. That means when your players say, hey, I want to sneak, they only declare that they are sneaking. There is no roll made when they start sneaking. So if they're infiltrating a castle, they just let you know they're sneaking through. You'll only roll when a guard walks by the hallway they're in. Then they'll all get to go hide and they'll roll stealth at that point. There's a couple advantages with this. One, there's no metagaming, not that I would ever accuse your players of metagaming. And two, it lets players be a little more creative with how they're hiding from that specific guard or doing whatever. And they might even get advantage. Like someone's like, oh, I hide behind the drapes and, you know, my feet are subtly sticking out the bottom, right? It's a fun time, and they can be a little more creative with it. Now, as far as how often you should roll stealth, that's up to the Dungeon Master to decide. Thanks, everyone.